This rifle is signed by approximately 93 World War II veterans. About 30 of them on this have already passed away. The VA says there's less than 300,000 World War II veterans still alive of the 16 million who served during World War II. I made it a mission, you call it therapy, call it research, call it what have you, of meeting these men that we've been reading about our whole lives, and go see each one and interview them and learn how to live a successful life after combat. Since there was so many people coming from all around the country, family members and veterans included, I thought a good rendezvous point would be F Troop of the Massachusetts State Police. We were gonna need some organization, we were gonna need some help. Those guys are great at that. It was a good place for the buses to pick us up, sort through luggage, and have everyone meet their chaperones matched with their veterans. During this time at the State Police Barracks, we went over the kind of the plan of attack in the course of going through the security, the airport, but most of all, I had them sign posters and gifts to give the Belgian people, and also the actual rifle that spawned the whole project.
Right here?
Yep, you're printing. Awesome.
Pretty good.
And Ron, remember this bad boy? We wouldn't be able to get it done without the supporters, the chaperones, and most of all, the Massachusetts State Police and the Winthrop Police Department.
We want to welcome you to Troop House. This is the flagship barracks of the Massachusetts State Police. It's a very modern barracks. We're in charge of patrolling the airport, the seaport, and all the areas in the certain sections of Boston that we work at. So we want to thank you. I want to thank you all for your services here. I look out at this crew right here. I got some troopers here, but I won't not mess with you guys. Right? Yeah. We're going to start loading the buses, so he'll call off who's going to be on what bus. We'll go out to the buses, get your luggage, and any accessibilities that you have. That way we have a coordinated event. We're going to escort you over to Terminal E. And from Terminal E, we're going to get you right through customs, and it's going to be a great flight out. So, but we want to thank you for your service, and we welcome you wholeheartedly.
Arriving to the airport, it was awesome to see the supporters, the family members, the fire department, the police departments, the local media, and I know they were there because this was a historic moment. This was the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, and they wanted to see these veterans return. As all these people were seeing us off, this was their opportunity to take photos, shake hands with the veterans, because they knew they couldn't be there on this trip, so this was their big moment too.
You've been a great family. You guys are awesome. All right. Have a great trip. How much gear you got going with you?
Atlanta Airport 6 with service to Toronto City Airport. You have 4 minutes to make your way to gate E2 for boarding. Thank you.
I was surprised myself that Massport and the CEO of Massport had set up a conference for us at the terminal before we left. I think that's where we first saw that these veterans were about to have a special trip. All the media was there, all the local dignitaries as well as the Secretary of Veteran Services were there to say a few words and make sure these veterans got the proper farewell.
Let me start by saying it's a privilege and an honor to be here in the presence of our 17 World War II veterans and their families who are traveling on Air France this evening for the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Ken Turner.
And so in the waning days of December 1944, Hitler's Nazi war machine launched what has become known as the Battle of the Bulge. Fought in the densely forested Ardennes region of northern Belgium, this conflagration was the largest and bloodiest single battle fought by the United States in our history. It is considered the third deadliest military campaign in our country's history, with an estimated 19,000 Americans killed in the month-long snow-covered struggle against nearly 450,000 battle-tested Nazis.
Before I knew it, everyone was boarded, all the veterans are seated, and that plane was bound for France and then off to Belgium. When we landed, I knew it was going to be a long day for these veterans. They had just been up the night before, overnight in that flight. We landed in Paris. Our first destination was Reims, where John Katsaros' B-17 crashed. We wanted to reunite him with the town of Reims and also the son of the man who saved his life that day. We had lunch, and then we were bound for the Luxembourg National Cemetery.
It's gonna be a quick lunch, guys. We have 45 minutes to eat. This is day one, so it's gonna be hectic. We're just trying to make it to the cemetery before it's too dark for anyone to see anything and before it's closed. The cemetery's having saturation issues because of all the rain. They typically don't let people on the grass, but they're gonna make exceptions for us, so that's why we really have to boogie to get there.
We were really pressed for time. These guys had been up all night. We still had to make it to Luxembourg before sundown so these guys could see the cemetery. So I knew it was going to be a quick lunch in Reims, but I wanted to stop there for John Katsaros, who was in the 8th Air Force, whose B-17 went down in that town, and also Frank Polowarczyk from the 79th Division, whose division marched through Reims 75 years before that.
Okay, we're soon going to be approaching the Luxembourg Cemetery in approximately 15 minutes' time. It contains 5,070 of your service members. There are also 2 Medal of Honor recipients in the cemetery. There are also 95 of the unknown with this very nice inscription, "Here rests in honour glory, a comrade in arms known but to God." And we have 95 of those young men. Okay, we have 1 civilian. He was working for the Allies, OSS. And we have 1 lady who is a nurse, and she was killed in a car incident in 1947. But because she was out here doing what she did during the Battle of the Bulge, she's allowed to be laid to rest. And we have 2 generals laid to rest in the cemetery, and one of them, as you know, is Patton.
975 men in the 10th Armored Division gave their lives in World War II, and about 200 of them are buried here at the U.S. Military Cemetery at Ham, Luxembourg, and 10 of those men are from my company.
Luxembourg American Cemetery is extremely important because the majority of the veterans who were killed during the Battle of the Bulge and after are buried there. A lot of these men from these divisions that we brought knew people buried in that cemetery. These are kids who've never returned home and maybe never even had a visitor. So that's why it was important.
Here at the Luxembourg American Cemetery, we have the graves of over 5,000 service members that gave their lives for freedom during World War II. These soldiers gave their lives during the Battle of the Bulge and the final Allied advance to the Rhine River. These soldiers are buried regardless of rank, regardless of where they came from, regardless of religion. They're all considered equal upon death, and they're memorialized here in the cemetery. We also have memorialized here the graves of over 350 soldiers that never came back after the war, and they're remembered on our 2 walls of the missing. General Patton is buried in a very special burial location in the Luxembourg American Cemetery. He actually was buried here 3 days after his death, when this was a temporary cemetery. But we had a lot of problems at the gravesite. You see, General Patton had so many visitors, so many people who wanted to pay respects to him that his grave was trampled, and the entire plot where he was buried was a big mud pit. The grounds team at the time did what they could, but they finally said enough is enough. And General Patton was temporarily moved between the two American flags that you see today in the cemetery. But that was supposed to be a temporary resting place.
It was late during our arrival at Luxembourg Cemetery. The cemetery is not illuminated by light at all besides sunlight and moonlight. The veterans moved quickly to visit some of the graves of soldiers they knew, but more importantly, during taps, about 5 of them brought down the colors and folded the American flag.
I get 4 strong people to come help me do the flags. Yeah? All right.
Seeing those guys bring that flag down after such a long day, I mean, they're up for almost 24 hours, but seeing them salute again, bring that flag down, it didn't strike me as them being 95 years old. I saw a bunch of 18 and 19-year-old kids doing that. I made it a point myself to visit the grave of Sergeant Joe Madonna from the 101st Airborne, who was killed during the Battle of the Bulge in the town of Foy. He was a Silver Star recipient, and he grew up about 3 blocks away from me. He's someone's, his street sign I see every night on patrol at the corner of Shirley Street, and I thought it would be nice for a couple of Winthrop police officers to visit his grave. This is Joseph Madonna. He was a paratrooper with the 101st Airborne, 506th Regiment. He earned the Silver Star during the Battle of the Bulge, and ultimately was killed by machine gun fire on January 13th, 1945. He was from Winthrop, Massachusetts. He was born in 1918. Every World War II veteran who served in Europe, most of their favorite general was Patton. Most of these guys use Patton as a key memory to have served in the Army in Europe. They all claim to have seen him, they all claim to have served under him, and for the most part, it's the truth. They viewed Patton as a father, a grandfather, and as a god during the war.
From Brest to various towns in southern Germany and Austria, whose names I can't pronounce, but whose places I have removed. The trail of the 3rd Army and the 19th Tactical Air Command and the 8th Air Force is marked by more than 40,000 white crosses, 40,000 dead Americans.
Because of the rain and damp, wet conditions, we were only able to get one veteran to visit his grave without ruining the grass. And I thought Bob White from the 17th Airborne Division would be a perfect fit, since he had never returned to Belgium in 75 years to visit Patton's grave. Although it was cold, clammy, rainy, and the men were tired, I still thought it was a good idea to gather everyone for a group photo. As the coach buses headed to the final destination of our hotels, I almost regretted pushing the veterans so long on day 1, but I knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to be able to push this all into one trip. As all 60 of us deboarded the buses, got our luggage, and finally were checking into our hotels, it was so good to see British World War II veteran Tom Schaefer in the lobby. He served with the 13th Paratroopers in the Ardennes Forest Offensive, the Battle of the Bulge as well. A lot of people don't know that the British served there too. I met him at the 75th anniversary of Operation Market Garden in Holland and invited him on the trip. And to see him waiting in the lobby for all of us to unite the Allied forces again was something very awesome.
It's pack all for you. All right, Duncan, what do you say? Translate. family.
Hey, we survived the first day. The next day is going to be a little less hectic. We got all our World War II veterans with us. It was a good time at the cemetery today. A lot of these men, the first time seeing their comrades. So salute until the next 5 days.
So today we are starting off the day with a group photo. It's the first time we have all the veterans together, some who are from out of state, some who are all from Massachusetts. Then we're going to head to the town of Foy, where there was a big battle with the 101st Airborne and several other divisions that fought in World War II. Leaving our hotel rooms on the coach buses, I could see all the veterans looking out the window of the buses. They could obviously remember the landscape. They were back in Belgium for the first time in 75 years, some of them. And our tour guides brought us to a very unique first stop, and that would be the German cemetery outside of Bastogne. As the buses pulled up to the German cemetery, I was quite interested to see what the American veterans would think about where we were.
Here you have the German cemetery, where are 7,000 graves of German soldiers are. Every cross you have 6 persons, 3 in front and 3 after. And there were many soldiers who were very young, 18 years in 44.
I have been to a couple of German cemeteries, and they always seem very somber.
Yes.
As contrasted to an American cemetery,
yes,
which is sort of gleaming white and filled with hope.
Yes.
Is there a reason for that?
No, I don't know. The German cemeteries are all similar.
But what I found very amazing was that each of the American veterans highly respected the Germans who were buried there.
How do you feel being at the German cemetery? Did you have respect for them as soldiers?
Yeah, we took care of them, but they were doing their job, what they were supposed to do, and we were doing ours.
Leaving the German cemetery brought us to the first destination of the town of Foy. There was some intense fighting there between the 101st Airborne during the Battle of the Bulge. It was there we got to see where Doc Blaney treated casualties from that battle. We got to see some battle damage on the farmhouses, and we even got to see a church that was once devastated.
Down by the church is where my father was, picked up some wounded soldiers to go up to. He volunteered from the medic station, and he volunteered to pick them up, but he couldn't take them back because the Germans overran it.
In 44, when the church was destroyed in the war, one soldier takes the little bill and he says, "Oh, I will have one souvenir from Bastogne, from Belgium." And he goes back to home, and then he has thought about him, no, it was not good, I had stolen something of Belgian people. So in 1976 he comes back to Belgium, and he takes it back to the church, and we have made a big ceremony.
Pulling up to the Ardennes forest, we were at the Boy Jack's foxholes. These foxholes were primarily occupied by Easy Company of the 101st Airborne. None of our veterans were with Easy Company. We had veterans with the 101st Airborne, but this was a chance to really bring them back to just see foxholes. All these men had dug foxholes, so to see them still remaining in the forest really brought them back to their own divisions. You know, mind you, we weren't going to find everybody's individual foxhole, but to bring them to these sets of foxholes that spawned a Band of Brothers documentary and such, really made these guys able to show their family members and chaperones, hey, this is something like I had to dug, this is something I had to live in.
Where the high trees are, you have the Germans, and the German line went round and about 10 foot into the forest line here, so that was the Germans on 2 sides. Okay, you can see the line of foxholes across here, 1, 2 and 3, so you can work out the distance of the Germans. Okay, so if we go down now while everyone's standing here, we'll give the German perspective. Look at this here, across here is the German line, so we can see them.
Holy crap.
So this is the line, so this is the German perspective looking back the way.
And where are you just shooting into the trees?
Yeah, just shooting into the trees.
So now, are they trying to move forward?
The Germans are trying to take you guys. So they're pushing forward. But you can see the distance.
I started to walk through the forest by myself, And it was an amazing feeling because I had traveled there 2 years before on my own and was blown away by what I was looking at and what I was seeing, and standing in the same foxholes men had fought 75 years before, where just the ability to take 5-10 feet a day was a success. These men froze in these foxholes, they died in these foxholes, they bled in these foxholes, they prayed to God in these foxholes. And here I was 75 years later bringing 17 men who lived through it back. As we were loading on the buses to leave the foxhole area, I noticed a couple of Belgian civilians. Actually, I think they were French. And one of them was wearing a 6th Armored Division jacket.
So he says that he's coming since 2004 for any commemorations here in Normandy, and he wouldn't be alive today without all these men, so it's an honor for him to be able to meet them.
J'ai subi un AVC au mois de juin, en commémoration en Normandie. J'ai fait un AVC cérébral, un accident vasculaire cérébral, et je suis ici aujourd'hui. Malade ou
He
pas.
had a stroke last June in Normandy, but he's back here because he still wants to meet veterans.
And I went up to him to talk to him, and I said, hey, you know, we have a 6th Armored Division with us. And as soon as she translated that I had a 6th Armored Division veteran with us on the buses, this kid's eyes lit up. He couldn't believe it. He took off his jacket, he's asking Wayne to sign his jacket, and this was really the first taste we got to see how grateful the civilians were to meet American World War II veterans. After leaving the foxholes, we got to stop at a variety of different monuments, but it was really good to see the 10th Armored Division monument in Bastogne. We had a 10th Armored Division veteran with us, Bob Weber. My grandfather also served with the 10th Armored Division, so that was a very special moment for myself.
Where was it from?
B Company, 3rd Tank Battalion.
And,
the 10th Armored, the 3rd, 11th, and 21st Tank Battalion served with the 10th Armored.
Okay. Did you walk behind the tanks?
Yeah, sometimes we rode on the tanks.
Yeah.
It wasn't
how did you communicate with the tanks? The guys inside for support? It's tough, huh? You didn't? No grunt phone either on that.
No.
To talk to the tanks,
That's
yeah.
right.
To reunite these actual veterans with their division-specific monuments was a great historic touch. Getting into Bastogne Town Square, the veterans unloaded the buses, and this was a good opportunity to get them a group photo in actually downtown Bastogne. They did it in front of the 10th Armored Monument, which is actually 11th Armored Division tank that was destroyed during the battle in the center of town. We gathered them around for a photo before we entered Café Carré, one of Bastogne's most veteran-friendly restaurants. You can immediately see how American-friendly they are. There's American flags, there's paintings of GIs, there's monuments, there's people waving to us, people walking around in American soldier attire, there's Jeeps.
It's my grandfather, Bob Weber, 10th Armored Division. They were the first ones in Bastogne before the 101st arrived. And he just came back for the 75th anniversary. He's 95 years old now. Put his picture on the wall. Pretty cool.
Before this trip began, I had been contacted by some local German historians who wanted to reunite a German tank commander with American veterans. I had cleared this with all the veterans. As much as I wanted to surprise them, I had to make sure all of them felt comfortable meeting an actual German soldier.
Jürgen, the German tank commander, he's walking down the hallway now. His tank was destroyed in Bastogne by six rounds that hit his Tiger tank. So we're gonna just clap for him to have the courage to come and face you guys after all this time, as you guys the victors. So
get this camera.
Want to clap 6 times?
Yeah, there you go. This is Jürgen right here. So. And this is, Wayne was with the 6th Armored Division that fought against your unit in World War II, 6th Armored.
I'd rather have you as a friend.
So Jürgen, the Tiger tank commander, was a very brave man. Not just him as a soldier, but to be able to walk into this room full of Americans during the anniversary of a battle they lost and to shake the hand of a soldier I brought from the 6th Armored Division who was responsible for destroying his tank during the battle was, I don't think words can describe the anticipation that was coming. The two of them, Wayne and Jurgen, hit it off really well, talking with a translator and shaking hands and making peace. I think a lot of the veterans who saw that, who may have not fought against Jurgen's actual specific division, also started to make their way to shake his hand while he was seated between all the veterans for lunch. As Jurgen and Wayne were meeting for the first time shaking hands, I tried to listen in to what Wayne was saying, and he said something along the lines of, "I'm glad we could meet like this and be friends than the way it used to be." After lunch, we got to see the 90th Division Monument with Hank Baggs, who had never returned before. We went on to the 101st Airborne Museum.
It's great to be here with fellow warriors, Army and Marines that we've all fought together in World War II and these current wars, and to share this with each other, I think is, for me, it's extremely impactful. I love it that, you know, in your 90s, the war is still there, but we stay connected, and you're doing that, and everybody on this trip is a big part of that. And I think that's an important thing. So anybody that has not connected with a World War II vet to understand the very unique experience of them, you just have to do it. I think it's important, don't you?
I was very happy to meet that German tank commander at dinner time today, and we meet as friends rather than as enemies. It's so much better.
The museum curator was really good to us. In return, I gave him a copy of the cover of the rifles signed by all the veterans. The Café Carré wanted us back after our long day, and there they had Belgian honor guards, reenactor honor guards, and a packed restaurant to greet us. They brought all the veterans in, clapping for them, and then they unveiled a wall of heroes with the photos of all these men in uniform to remain in that restaurant forever. Our veterans became basically the Beatles during their hype. You couldn't get near them. Everybody wanted autographs, photos, and the veterans were loving it. They were raising a glass, having a beer at their age, and enjoying every minute of it.
All the veterans of Bastogne have come, have signed complete around this area from Saint-Mère-Église. And this is all the originals and other pieces from America, from the soldiers coming here.
There's a gentleman here who is not here who introduced me to most of these veterans who served in the Battle of the Bulge. His photo hangs on that wall. He was with the 87th Infantry Division. He's the one who connected me with so many veterans to get them here. He helped plan this trip, and he died the day we left. So this toast is to John McAuliffe.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. And he ain't gonna jump no more.
Baby son grew up and said a troop was life for me. A jumper like my daddy was is all I want to be. I only hope that I can jump just half as well as he.
He ain't gonna jump no more. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. And he ain't gonna jump no more.
Now they sent him to Afghanistan and then into Iraq. The bullet that came speeding out went deep into his back. He hit the ground, but his grenade found enemy on track.
He ain't gonna jump no more. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Louder! Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. And he ain't gonna jump no more.
The next morning, I briefed everyone at breakfast again on the plan of attack, and there was no trying to drag anyone out of bed. All the World War II veterans were bright, shining early, ready to go. It was then Jurgen and his German team showed up again to actually tour with us in the battlefields. And before we took off on the buses, they got together for a nice photo by the Christmas tree.
I was in that same outfit, but I wasn't in a tank then.
But you were outside.
Yes.
You saw him.
Yes.
Marcy, there's just so much to tell about Marcy. But I'd like to tell you about a family I was with the night their house burned down. We went into their house, and there was a lady there, an older couple, and there was a younger couple. So we had to let his cows out. And when he let his cows out, the Germans had a tank in that road, and they mowed his cows down. See, we would have been out of there, but the messenger boy, the runner they call him, from headquarters company, he never made it to our house. We found him the next morning, he was dead in the street.
At one point, after a brutal snowstorm, the weather let up enough so that we could go on the attack again. And I spotted from my foxhole another foxhole about 35, 40 yards away. And so I jumped out of my foxhole, ran in a crouch, holding my rifle in my right hand. And as I got to that foxhole, I didn't see anybody in it. So I jumped and looked down, and my God, there was a German in the foxhole. Then a miracle happened. The miracle was that my eyesight was the keenest it had ever been. My hearing was the most acute it had ever been. And I felt stronger than I had ever felt again. There's a life lesson there. We're able to do more than we think we can do. And if we approach a problem we don't think we can do, God will help us do it. So I jumped into that foxhole and I strangled him. Why did I strangle him? Because I didn't think we were that close to German forces, and it was important to kill this man silently instead of alerting Germans that we were close to them. It was all very sudden, and it was all very over very quickly.
I knew this was going to be the day we were going to see some of the 87th Infantry Division monuments and battlefields. That's why we got to talk to Fred Whitaker and Rodney Perkins before we took off. In our group of veterans, we had 3 veterans from the same division, the 87th Division. It was Fred Whitaker, Rodney Perkins, and Ernie Roberts. Ernie had never been back to Belgium, where he was wounded, where he fought, where he earned his Bronze Star and then eventually a Silver Star. So when we brought him to the 87th Division's monument, to me, I know that's where we filled a void in his life.
Right in this area is where Ernie was, his squad was held up in a house. He was a machine gunner. He carried the tripod all the way from France to Germany. Ernie says that a few of the guys went to go milk some cows, get some food together because they were starving. And when Ernie was in the house, the machine gun was gone off his tripod because the squad left, and he was wondering why everyone left, and he looked out the window and there was a Panzer tank. The tank fired a round into the house, but it did not detonate. The round went through the house, both walls, sending splinters and soot and rock into his face. He fell out the second-story window, and as he was running with the tripod on his back, he could feel rounds ricocheting off the tripod while he was carrying it on his back.
The tour guides did an amazing job showing us then and now photos from the war and today. And primarily we saw Rodney Perkins in the town of Morrissey. There was a lot of photos from the fighting that happened in Morrissey. And Rodney is one of those guys who was shot in this town. He engaged the enemy in this town. He saw the sacrifice of both Americans, Germans, and civilians in this town when the barn he was in caught fire. We got to see, although the weather was pretty poor this day, we got to be on the very street that the barn he tried to put the fire out on, and they freed the cows, the civilians' cows, and unfortunately the cows ended up getting machine gunned by a German tank. But this was a story that he remembers very vividly, and we were there, back where it happened. As our bus continued through this small town, as it drizzled rain, we approached Saint-Hubert. Saint-Hubert was liberated by the 87th Division. It was here that we saw one man who converted his house into an 87th Division museum, an entire museum of relics, uniforms, guns, pictures, posters, and historic artifacts that were all from the 87th Division found in that area.
Guys, I'm very pleased to welcome you. 75 years ago, you come to set us freedom. Belgian people will never forget the sacrifice of your friends. Here in Saint-Hubert and its villages, you fought for our freedom. In this museum, Olivier keeps the memory of these fights. You will recognize your weapons and uniforms, and also these of your enemies. Since 75 years, Europe lives in peace, thankful of your sacrifice for our democracy. And your country keeps on defending the value of our civilization. God bless you and your country.
To see the veterans from the 87th Division look at these relics, it made me feel satisfied. It let them know that somebody in this foreign country is always going to remember what they did here. During lunch, veterans got to eat, interview at the Belgian embassy, as well as walk around and then do a Q&A with the local students. 5 of the veterans I was able to scrounge up to perform a Q&A on a stage like amphitheater. It was awesome because myself and Joel Lamberti, our tour guide and longtime friend in Belgium, was able to translate what these veterans had to say to the local students about the war, sacrifice, and living in a free democracy.
The first veteran here, his name is Robert White. Robert served with the 17th Airborne Division during the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge was his first indoctrination to combat. He had never seen his monument today in Humont, ever. In 75 years, it was his first time back, and it was a very emotional experience. He also went on to jump during Operation Varsity and jumped into Germany and landed.
Which battle was the hardest or a very fight for us?
I actually asked Fran that question earlier because he was in Normandy, Holland, Battle of the Bulge, Germany. He told me one of the worst battles that he was in was when they were surrounded in Germany, if I'm not mistaken.
Donc oui, comme il a connu toutes les batailles de l'Europe, donc la Normandie, la Belgique, l'Allemagne, il dit que son plus dur moment, j'avais oublié de vous le traduire tout à l'heure, c'est quand son unité tout à la fin de la guerre en Allemagne a été encerclée pendant plusieurs jours. Handcraft wooden sculpture was made with the
V for victory.
V for victory and the shape of the friends.
Yep.
So,
It's for you, and thank you. Thank you very, very much. For you. Don't exactly.
I don't think you'd see the same turnout for American students seeing World War II veterans, and I'm not saying the American students don't appreciate and find veterans interested, but when you're raised to be taught that these are the men who freed you and liberated your country, it adds a whole nother level of excitement.
Thank you for all of you for what you did 75 years ago. Thanks again.
Thank you. We'd like to present you with this painting that was completed by Ernie Roberts, and it's signed by all the veterans who made this trek, including 2 from America who were too sick to come. So all their names are here, and we'd like to give that to you. So no problem. After we wrapped up the Q&A, this was a chance for our veterans to leave a piece of themselves in Bastogne forever. 3, 2, 1. So that's you. This is dedicated to all of them. On the plaque, it represented each division of the men that we brought back on the trip. I specifically had 2 of the men who had never returned to Belgium unveil it, Bob White and Ernie Roberts. And once we unveiled it, all these veterans got to see a bronze plaque that'll remain there forever. I know we struck home at that monument because all the veterans asked their chaperones to push them up against the monument to take a photo. This was them getting their own photo. This wasn't me pushing a camera onto them this time, and I'm glad we did that. We started off the day, again, breakfast as usual, a little briefing inside the cafeteria. However, this day was going to be different than all the others. This was Nuts Day. This was the official recognition of the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge by the country of Belgium. This was going to be the most celebrated day. They call it Nuts Day because as General Anthony McAuliffe was surrounded with the 101st Airborne in Bastogne, the Germans gave them the ability to surrender. However, General McAuliffe's response was the word, simply just one word, nuts, that he wrote on a piece of paper and had returned to the German lines. A lot of the Germans were dumbfounded by this, and those who didn't speak English asked what it meant, and it was eventually interpreted to them that means go to hell. And then the fight was on. That morning there was a 326 medical company ceremony. This was very important and very rare. We were the only people to have a veteran from the 326 medical company in Belgium. They were part of the 101st Airborne and were completely overrun and captured during the Battle of the Bulge. And to have a living member from that company be back there for an anniversary at their monument was historic.
How many officers or people that you punched out so your rank got knocked down so you only was a staff sergeant?
I don't know how many, but it was a lot.
Lunch was extremely special that day because we were graced with the presence of the U.S. House of Representatives as well as U.S. Senators. Nancy Pelosi made sure she came over and said hello to our veterans. I saw Congressman Seth Moulton and Stephen Lynch as well from Massachusetts, who made sure they said hi to all the guys from New England. I know the veterans, whether Democrat or Republican, this day were so excited to see these politicians and have them greeted. That made them feel very special regardless of their party, that these politicians came all the way from America to celebrate this anniversary with them. After lunch, the weather did take a turn for the worst. And although this was supposed to be the day that the veterans get paraded through the town, we really had to keep them on the coach bus so that they didn't get sick, so that they could live to see, hopefully see another anniversary or, not get ill when they returned home. A lot of people, and even the veterans, seemed a little bit dissatisfied that they couldn't ride in the open train cart that was supposed to take them through the town. And I was bummed out myself that we couldn't get the full Bastogne anniversary experience. But as those coach buses began to roll, it really didn't matter because the townspeople were lined up 10 and 20 deep on the sidewalks to greet us, wave and cheer. I saw American flags, I saw Belgian flags, and the closest thing I can relate this to is like the Patriots Super Bowl parade in Boston, where it's just a sea of people cheering. I couldn't take my eyes off the people, but I would quickly glance at others on the bus and the veterans and see what they thought, and they were just all smiles. They were all smiles, so it didn't matter that they didn't get to ride in the little vehicles. They still got the proper greeting on those buses. At Bastogne Town Hall, our veterans were greeted, handed coins, gift baskets. There was a formal ceremony, but what was great in the beginning is that they had a big band play music from the 1940s for these men. And you could see that the veterans really enjoyed it because they're tapping their feet, they're nodding their heads, they're shaking their hips, and we have reached their ultimate comfort zone at this point. The overall trend I saw for this 75th anniversary, which was really hyped up, was that there was so much demand. You know, the veterans had to be here, the veterans had to do this, be in this photo, show up here to this, but I don't think it actually registered to some people on how these veterans got here. Here were 16 to 17 veterans in their mid-90s who just appeared in Belgium. How'd they get here, why? And that's what I was most proud about this whole rifle project. Although many of the people may have not known how they got there, it was the rifle that brought these people here and completed their lives, and as well as birthed new experiences with the young Belgian kids who got to see a World War II veteran with their own two eyes before it was too late. After the ceremony at Town Hall, it was good to have a nice, peaceful dinner back at one of our favorite restaurants, Leo Wagon. Here we got to invite another 101st Airborne World War II veteran we had just met that night to have dinner with us and his family.
This is a coin from our trip that we'd like to give you, and his son and granddaughter are here to eat with us.
We invited Jürgen, the German veteran, and his family back with us, and got to reflect on the whole trip.
Okay, explain the story to these people, please.
So when we first went to Normandy last May, we brought Francis Murphy back, and I did some research from my hometown who was killed in Normandy, and I found Ralph Cunningham, who lived down the street from me, and he had jumped in on June 6th. He didn't last long. He got captured. It's just all about where you landed, really. And him and about a few other paratroopers were held captive in a monastery for a while, and then unfortunately were executed at close range and left there dead. So that was his short time in the war, and there's just simply a small little rusty street sign in Winthrop dedicated to him. So I found out he was still buried in Normandy, and we paid him a visit in Normandy, and that's where the story ends.
No. It's not.
No.
Now, when they came to Normandy, they kicked a hornet's nest. Because people were saying, what are these guys looking for? What they want to know about? What they want to know about the monastery for? And it's got a hive of activity going on. And I had the great pleasure to meet a gentleman in Normandy, and his father found Cunningham, and his helmet and his boot knife was removed.
No!
That's his boot knife.
Oh my god. Oh my god!
Take it home.
Yes.
Do what you got to do with it. When we come back, we'll finish the story. I want you to see a guy. You do that to me, all right? Okay? There you go.
The only two veterans I thought to remove temporarily from their last dinner was Jürgen Tegethoff, the German Tiger tank commander, and Wayne Field from the 6th Armored Division.
Nehmt Kontakt untereinander auf, nutzt die Zeit, euch zu besuchen und versucht auch die andere Seite zu verstehen.
I saw an opportunity to personally interview them one-on-one with each other and reflect on what it was like to be at the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge and what they took away from the whole week. On our last full day in Belgium, we attended a very nice ceremony in the town of St. Vith that was heavily destroyed during the Second World War, and many American casualties were captured, killed, and wounded. After St. Vith, I brought all the veterans back to the Malmedy massacre site, where some 90 veterans were caught in a giant war crime committed by German troops on American veterans. I found it interesting to bring them here, one, because it is a historic site to remember those poor souls who were killed that day, but here was a battlefield that I could personally give the tour to. that I could speak to the veterans from what I studied the Malmedy Massacre, and to show them how dedicated I was to what went on in Belgium during the Battle of the Bulge. Hitler began to move his forces off the Eastern Front, who were fighting the Russians, and start heading towards Antwerp, and they were going to steamroll everything in their way. Before they even got here and even touched or saw an American, they were killing scores of Belgian civilians. It happened right through the towns. Hitler wanted them to do exactly what they were doing on the Eastern Front and apply it right to Belgium. And because they were working through speed and basically ferocity just to get up there. And they see this big, beautiful target of vehicles, and obviously not infantrymen or heavy armor. So the German tanks opened up on the first vehicle, disabled it, opened up on the last vehicle, disabled it. Everybody in between was getting machine gun shot, and basically a whole convoy of guys are in a ditch just like this, hiding, praying for their friggin' lives. Now they have roughly 100 and 120 American prisoners, all right? But they gotta work by speed. They have to work fast. So what are we gonna do with a bunch of these prisoners? We don't have anywhere to bring them. Well, what's their go-to? This field right here that you see, it looks like there's haystacks cornering it off. They put them in that field right there. One German took his pistol into this group just like this and started firing one pistol. Then guys started to actually run, and all machine gun opened up on these guys. One of the biggest war crimes against our guys right there in that field. As soon as the American survivors get to the unit to tell them what just happened, word began to spread like fire throughout the American lines. The Germans are not taking prisoners. The Germans are not taking prisoners. The Germans are not taking prisoners. They just killed a bunch of our guys. So what do you think the Americans did for the rest of the Battle of the Bulge? Yeah, they took prisoners, but yeah, they did not. We have guys on these buses who saw Americans kill SS troopers.
Well, the Germans had, some of them wanted to surrender, some just ran back, you know. And of course, a couple of my buddies shot a couple of them. I didn't shoot anybody.
But they were SS?
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely SS they shot. The regular army, they were good soldiers. They weren't wicked like the SS.
Got it. On the way back, we stopped in Morrissey, Belgium, in Saint-Hubert one more time for Rodney Perkins. Rodney went into the museum of the 87th Division and personally handed them a letter of a soldier who was killed in action from his company. The letter was from that soldier's mother, and Rodney felt like it deserved to sit in that museum after all this time. He's carried it. Rodney wanted to make it a point to return back here to give you this. It is a history of Company B, 345th Regiment of the 87th Division, as well as a copy of the letter his friend's mother wrote to him while he was still here after his friend was killed in action.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for all.
Before leaving Saint-Hubert for the last time, I thought it would be very neat to stage a photo of two 87th Division men, Rodney Perkins and Ernie Roberts, to stand in the street of the main drag of Saint-Hubert and match it with a 75-year-old photo of their division liberating the town. It was an epic photo and a monumental memory that these men won't forget. On the way out of town, we got to see some of the 87th Division foxholes, and Rodney tell us what kind of foxhole it was, whether it was machine gun or mortars, and that was really neat to have him there describing what it was like to be an infantryman 75 years ago.
One time, a replacement came in at night, and they put him in a foxhole. And the next morning, he thought everybody had left him. He gets up, and it snowed that night. And all he could see was snow, and he couldn't see anybody. Then after a while, the sun come up, he watched heads coming out of the ground, or popping up.
On our last day leaving La Roche, I was trying to really prolong the trip as long as I could. This was just, I knew deep down inside I'd never be able to duplicate what I just did. There was a tank on the side of the road while we exited La Roche. And the veterans had been given roses from the days before in gift bags. So instead of just throwing the roses away in the garbage, I thought it would be nice to exit the bus and have them all leave one final gift in Belgium before we departed. The plane ride home at the end of the trip was certainly where I got the most emotional on this trip, to the point where I had to put my hoodie over my face. Because I looked around, I saw all the veterans, I knew this was the end, and I knew I would never be able to pull something off like this again. There was never going to be another 75th anniversary, and the fact that we got 16 World War II veterans in their mid-90s back, healthy, was historic. Historic's not even a word for it. It's never been done. Finally landing at Boston's Logan Airport, my initial idea was to get all the veterans back at the state police barracks and give them a personal thank you from me so they know how I felt. I mean, I had bounced around from each veteran during the trip and asked questions, but I really wanted to deliver one last message to them. The trip was exhausting, and to save time before we got clobbered by the media or the welcoming party, I just pulled them all aside at the luggage area, and I just had to tell them how I felt, and got a little choked up doing so, but they all started to clap for me, and that's all I could ask for. As those sliding doors opened and we pushed those 16 wheelchairs back onto American soil through Terminal E at Boston Logan Airport, I knew the rifle had accomplished all of this, and it wouldn't have been done without that project. The welcoming party was there to greet us. The media went to do their job immediately interviewing veterans, and we were loading onto the buses back to the state police barracks where we had met 6 days before, and we began to disperse. Although we were dispersing for the final time and going our separate ways, I wasn't depressed because I knew the rifle was going to continue to tell their stories and share their experiences forever.